Hi, Todd. So, Todd, you're our CTO, and we're going to walk through how Coupa and GHX got the specific requirement ratings they did in the healthcare EDI category. So let's kind of go over a few things to start with. So at the feature level, features are rated using a combination of LLMs, experts, and deep research processes. In this process, we yield requirements, features, and so on in our matrix. So the one must enable integration with inventory and logistics systems was one of them. And it has 4 features attached to it. You can see the list below of the 4 features that are attached. The threshold for calling something great in our system numerically is above 90 and a good is being above 80. This is not visible to the user, but we do have a numerical scoring system in the background. If a user set something to a great or the system set something to a great, that would be a 95 and it would be an 85 if it were a good. The threshold is 90 and 80 respectively. In this use case specifically, all 4 features have the same priority of important. And so that's why when we look at the requirement score calculation by product, all features have the same weight. Todd, where should we go from here to describe how we got to the raw ratings and the contribution to the score?
Let's first discuss the concept of the data that we keep. So there's the data that sits in the LLM process, which includes all the documents uploaded as part of the context, and it includes all of our question flow. We do keep track of questions and answers, or prompts and answers. So that data we have. When the LLM gives a decision or produces an output, we do ask it to provide sources when it's a specific reasoning behind a rating. So that data is kept and included in our database, but we don't have a one-to-one mapping. We just know what we fed it and which LLMs we asked and what the sequence of the questions were. And then in the middle are the experts who obviously their knowledge base is not codified. They're looking at it and making suggestions and changes as we go. The end result is one row in a table that says, here's a product, here's a feature related to that product, here's a rating related to that feature. And then the LLMs and the experts say, within this type of use case, here's a priority to assign to that feature. That's how we get to those numbers. There are actually multiple types of scales available. We've found through trial and error that this rating system in line with people's expectations and the way they use the results. So that's the weighting scale that was used in the results that are common on the platform.
Should we go to any of these tabs, Todd, to walk through the data?
These are basically accumulation tabs happening in the background. Every time you make a change to the model, this is basically completely recalculated because it depends on all the different alternatives that you selected and weighted. And basically it's a system of weighting within groups and between groups to come up with the ratings. When you're looking at the priority on a requirement, that is a weighted of the priorities of the features within that requirement. So it's a within group rating. And then we also use that same technique to come up with a rating for that requirement. So in this case, the selected feature, all the features were important. So they all have the same weights. So you're going to see a feature weight that's identical, and then that's used to weight the ratings, which in this case were generally either 95s or 85s. So these calculations are happening in the background, and then they're totaled up. They'll match the numbers that you see on the sheet. These numbers here on this sheet will match the numbers on the impact table. If you go to the next sheet, the final scores are, you can add those up to get to the actual score for that requirement for that product. That's what's added on the first page where you get to the 89s and the 90s.
So this would be a 90 and this would be like a 90.5. I mean,
Right.
These are rounded up in here. It makes sense.
Yes.
And then these are the final requirement scores. And
yes, those are rounded in the sheet. I don't know if the decimals will show in this sheet, but they should. That's actually shouldn't be a 90. It's slightly below. And the other one is slightly above 92. And these weights are overalls, so they're weighted so that we can compare the products across all the requirements. Those end up in the final score, but you can't see it in an individual requirement.
Got it. And so we end up with these rating contributions to score for each of the vendors. And so we can see here, Coupa edges out GHX by a few points, but it puts it above the threshold for being great based on our schema. So Coupa is great for the requirement must enable integration with inventory and logistics systems, whereas GHX is a good because it's just under.
We do this adjustment because we found through trial and error that it produces better results. Because if you look at Coupa's 3 greats and 1 good, and you would think, well, they should probably rate that a great. But if you look at GHX, it's 2 greats and 2 goods. And so you would say it probably should be rated a good. It probably is not a great. And by putting the slight adjustment, we end up basically forcing the model not to end up at a 90 even, because then you'd have to make a decision. So it will basically, because of the math, end up at an 89. And it also gives us another advantage where we don't end up with divisions by 0 when we have A's, which would otherwise be 0 in the model. So the NAs are actually 0.00001, so that we can not worry about that sort of thing when we do addition and multiplication.